Hey, Mr. Bigfoot, what you eating?
My famous 3-bean tacos. Would you like one?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, just let me splash some El Yucateco Caribbean hot sauce on it. And here you go.
Yum, this sauce is so tasty. It has the perfect balance of heat and flavor.
Yeah, El Yucateco is all about flavor, kid. They have 5 habanero-based sauces, guaranteed to make your taste buds happy. Red, green, Caribbean, black label reserve, and triple extra hot. Oh yeah.
Where can I get some?
Just go to shopelucateco.com and use code Paranormal Punchers to save 10%.
Thanks, Mr. Bigfoot.
Paranormal Punchers is part of the Podbelly Network. Go to podbelly.com for more great podcasts.
Hey y'all, this is Frank the Bigfoot, and you're listening to the Paranormal Punchers.
Friends, welcome to Paranormal Punchers. I'm Mark.
I'm Alicia.
I'm Nash.
And we have a special guest with us, author Ian Jaydid. How are you doing, Eden?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. It almost sounded like you called me Eden just now.
Now, I guess I said it so fast. Ian Jaydid.
All right. No, I've got an ex-girlfriend whose name is Eden. So I'm just like, what did you just call me? Actually, she's listed. I used her name in my first book. So I'm just like, that was kind of weird.
Well, I guess I shouldn't have had that bourbon before we started the podcast.
We talked about that. We're going to stay sober, I thought. I thought that was the plan. We were going to stay sober for this.
Oh, I thought it was the opposite.
Okay.
But Ian has a new book out. It's called Migration, and it discusses the unifying mechanics behind a vast spectrum of paranormal phenomenon such as astral projection, conscious time travel, and telepathy.
Oh. That's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm. It was.
Did I write that? I wrote that.
You wrote that. You wrote that. I tried to read it.
Did you? That's awesome. That's great. I mean, try. I fully encourage that. I remember very little of what I write, so I can go back and go, oh wow, this is some, I can really look at it objectively because I don't know. I'm just like, oh wow, did I write that? That actually wasn't too bad. So I've had that experience. Timothy Leary. I actually met Timothy Leary. That's how, so back in college, and somebody asked him, he was speaking, and I think he passed away just within a couple of years after he had given one of these last lectures. And someone asked him about time travel, actually. And they said, oh, Timothy Leary, you know what? Tell me about this theory of time travel you have. And he's like, what are you talking about? He goes, you wrote about it. And he has his book and everything. And so Timothy Leary's like, bring the book up here. And he reads his own passage. He goes, son of a gun, did I write this? Man, I must have been really high. I have no idea what I was talking about. No clue. And it was just like such a perfect Timothy Leary moment. I'm like, that was great. So that's how it feels sometimes when people are like, they describe my own book to me. I'm like, well, that sounds pretty interesting. I should read that sometime.
Now, Ian, you were on the show before with your book, Tripping the Field. And we had
first book, yes.
And we had a really interesting conversation, especially about, that astral projection and possibly you in the corner watching people sleep, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. Now it's all coming back to me.
But I'm really curious about the new book and especially the time travel.
Yeah.
Of course. So we're going to get into all of that. And it sounds weird. And yet, you know what? So I think it helps to explain kind of my background first, because I'm the kind of stuff that I am into and my experiences can be really confused with some sort of spirituality or some sort of new age stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of overlap, and I have nothing against spirituality or the new age movements or any of those things, but that is not the way I'm designed. I'm very much, I'd say I'm an atheist. I think atheism very much describes me in terms of from everything I've experienced, and we're going to go into all these crazy experiences that started some 30 years ago. I have no reason to believe that there is such a thing as a God necessarily. And I don't have, I would say I don't even really agree or believe that any of these things are necessarily supernatural. Let's use that word. I like the word supernatural. Like that any of this is somehow breaking the laws of physics. I don't know if I buy any of that. And that's when I got into a lot of these topics, again, when you start talking about astral projection, you start talking about meditation and lucid dreaming and all these things, it does have, it automatically is going to sound like there's a real spiritual bend to this. And that's why I usually come to you guys, like the paranormal people, because I feel like it kind of, my feeling is that this more fits into like something that is, these are definitely rare occurrences. These are very strange occurrences, but I think that they're not necessarily, beyond our physics. I think, in the same way that maybe UFOs are. Do you know what I'm saying in terms of when, I don't know if have any of you guys ever seen a UFO before? I've now seen 2 of them. It's so crazy. That's a whole other situation.
Wow. Well, you said you live next to them in a town just down the road from you, down by the foothills there.
Exactly.
So, there's a bunch of them there.
There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah,
but
I have not, but I really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first encounter was about 9 years ago, and that was out here. I was driving, and what I saw was an object that broke our understanding of physics. That's all I can say. I'm like, well, I don't know how big this thing was because it was at night. All I saw were the lights and the light trails. So I couldn't really tell what else was behind those lights, but what these things did, it just broke all concept of motion and propulsion and how gravity works and all that kind of stuff. So, my point about that is that when we see something like this, we experience something that you're like, that appears to be totally breaking our understanding of physics. I don't think that you immediately have to go, all right, well, now I'm no longer an atheist. Like, I'm no longer, right. Now I'm going to go join a cult, or something like that. I'm like, I don't know what I saw. I feel that I saw something that breaks our current understanding of science and physics, perhaps, but that doesn't mean that we just have to toss out science on any level. So that's kind of how I feel about consciousness, is kind of what we're going to be talking about. Like, we don't understand consciousness. We don't really have a solid understanding of, how it's made, where it comes from. And so I'm kind of in this position where I'm basically an atheist who happened to also start experiencing things with consciousness that seems to be beyond our normal understanding of how our awareness works, how our consciousness works. And I'm starting, and I've blended these ideas with as much as I can with what we do understand about physics, what we do understand about cosmology, how time actually works. So we're going to get into the concepts of time travel and whatnot. But, so I always kind of I feel like I need to give that preamble first. So, people understand I'm not trying to sell you on a religion or a cult, but if you guys want to join a cult, I'm just saying I'm open to it. I'm open to, and I will have to be the leader of the cult. And there's going to be a whole bunch of, there's going to be a lot of rules.
That's the best paying gig in the whole thing. Come on, being the leader is the way to go.
Is there any point in starting a cult if you're not going to put yourself in charge? I mean, I don't.
Right.
What else? Why else would you do this? So, where shall I start? Again, we've talked before, but it's been a while. I mean, it's been quite a while now. So I'll kind of start at the beginning. So somewhere around when I was 19, I began entering what they call lucid dreams. Now, at the time, I'm 49. So this was quite, we're talking about 30 years ago or so. The internet wasn't really a thing. So I couldn't just go and figure out, well, what is this? What exactly is going on? All I knew was that I was entering these visionary states right before I was waking up. So when I was asleep, I was entering these states that were hyper realistic. And that's all that I knew at first. I'm like, these are hyper real dreams. Have any of you ever experienced lucid dreaming on any level? Is there any, do you guys have any background with that whatsoever?
No, and I really wanted to. I took, did you ever hear of Alpha Brain? It's an on-it product. It's supposed to help possibly with lucid dreaming. And
a supplement, you mean?
A supplement, yeah.
What's it called?
Alpha Brain.
I've not heard of that, but I've heard of a lot of different, so many different pitches for different supplements. Yeah. I don't know.
And maybe that's not lucid dreaming, but the closest I came is flight. And I felt like, oh, I'm controlling this dream now. I am flying around.
Okay.
I got the hang of this. And then all of a sudden I crash landed in a cornfield and there was a zombie eating the guts out of somebody. And I was like, okay, I don't have the hang of this. And then I woke up.
So you felt that was lucid. So what was it?
I felt like I realized it was a dream. I'm like, all right, let's cruise around. I can fly now. What can I see? Right. I felt for a second I was conscious.
Okay.
That I was dreaming. And I was like, all right, now let's go. Let's have some fun and see what I can do with this.
Cool. Was there any other storyline going on at all? And I'm going to explain why I'm asking you this, but was there any other like drama going on, or was it simply a matter of, oh, I'm awake, I'm totally conscious, I'm just going to go try to fly? Or was there any other and I'm also being chased by some, I don't know, crazy monster behind me, or are you trying to get to somewhere? Was there a goal in the dream?
That's interesting you asked me that. Yes, the dream, and it's still vivid, but I can't believe I remember all of it. But it started out like in a haunted house scenario. I was in this house, could not get out. Doors were closing, things were happening, spikes were coming out of the walls. That kind of trap.
What was your relationship with that? What was your relationship with that stuff? Well, I mean, did you have an emotional response to it?
No, one of frustration.
Why?
I can't get out.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good enough. Go on.
But when I was able to get out, then I thought I needed to go across the street to the convenience store and get a pack of smokes.
Okay.
No, I don't smoke.
Okay.
Not
That's
anymore.
Interesting.
I did back in the day, but I never made it because then I was something triggered me and I took flight, and that's when I ended up in a cornfield with a zombie. Now, there's a
lot to unpack in that dream, right?
And maybe there's nothing to unpack. You could tell me just stop watching horror movies.
Yeah, I need to stop doing that. I was watching The Conjuring before bed last night. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm not even sure how I feel about ghosts, but it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, if it's a good horror story, I'm like, you're freaking me out. But okay, so that was it. So then you crashed into a cornfield, and then there was
when I landed, there was a zombie eating guts, but then it noticed me, and that's when things changed. Like, it's like, oh, I'm in danger, and then I woke up.
So you say that you felt that at some point you were aware that it was a dream, though.
Yeah, I felt I was aware that I'm in control of this, and the flying part mostly. Like, okay, now let's take off. What can I do?
So the reason
I lost control of it pretty fast.
Okay, so control is good. Control is good, but when I talk about a lucid dream, what I've learned over the years is what's actually going on with your consciousness is extremely tied to the narrative of the dream. And that is really what my last book, Migration, is all about. My first book, Tripping the Field, by the way, is total sci-fi, occult sci-fi. It's a wild, wacky adventure with shamans and shape-shifting and psychedelics. And it's just a wild, wacky adventure, but it's also based on, all my experiences over the years and whatnot. Migration is far more grounded, where I'm just more directly talking to my reader and just saying, this is exactly what I've experienced, but mostly my philosophy and how our consciousness specifically relates to narrative. And by that, I mean, when we talk about a lucid dream, I'm always asking someone, when they say, oh, I've had a lucid dream, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And specifically, what I'm asking you is, what was your relationship to the narrative? If you were totally aware that you were dreaming, what was your relationship to, oh, there's a haunted house? Was there, oh no, I'm in danger? Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because if you are fully lucid, you go, you know that you're dreaming. You know that your body's asleep. You know all of this. You become fully conscious. There is no confusion at all anymore with, oh, man, there's this thing after me, or man, there's these zombies, or man, I need a pack of smokes, even though I don't even smoke. Like, you're aware of all of that stuff. And so you're not buying into any of it. You're not being pulled. The way I kind of think of it is that you kind of, in most of our dreams, there's kind of like a leash around our neck on some level. And we're just kind of being pulled through the dream. I'm just like, you're just kind of chasing after some goal. Like, I need to get away from this, or I need to go solve this problem, or, whatever's going on in the dream. But in a lucid dream, all of that stops completely. Now, there's levels. Don't get me wrong. There's total levels. So it sounds like you reached a point where you realized, oh, hey, I kind of have this vague idea that none of this is real, and I can kind of control what's going on a little bit. And that's a great first step. I've known lots of people who have gotten to that step. I'm just saying that there is something way beyond that where you drop all of it, like completely. You're just like, there's no haunted house. There are no zombies. There's, and then things start getting really interesting, because then you have to start asking, well, what is real in this space? Exactly. Like, where am I, and what is my relationship to all the stuff that's going on? It's not like the haunted house would necessarily disappear, right? It's not like everything just vanishes around you. In fact, in most of my lucid dreams, my environment kind of will stay. In fact, it'll just become more intense. In fact, the people, the whatever's around me, I can still go and interact with them fully aware, knowing that I'm dreaming, and then go try to investigate. Okay, so who are these people around me? Can you can talk to them, you can have conversations. And as I said, things just keep getting more and more bizarre. So that's been my journey, like starting around 19, where it's like I started with that. And no, by the way, I had not done psychedelics at that point. I get that question a lot. I've done them now. I mean, I've done everything now. But at that point, people were like, yeah, so what were you on? I'm like, I wasn't on anything at all. In fact, we couldn't even get good weed in my high school. I don't even know what the problem was. We couldn't get anything. Like, there was just no good drugs around. So my experience with drugs was Bud Light at that point. So,
yeah.
So does that kind of make sense? Does that sound closer to like what you experienced? A little bit more like, I was kind of awake, but I wasn't really, you still were kind of being tugged along by the rules of the dream.
By the rules of the dream, for sure. There might have been a brief moment I felt like something a little bit different.
Yes.
But Rules of the Dream. And Nash, if you remember, we were running the Curse of Strahd D&D campaign, Death House.
Right.
So I feel like setting that up to run that campaign, all that fuel was in my head, and that's why I had a murder house trying to stop me from getting out.
Yeah, so you kind of had a typical, most of our normal dream states. It's your brain is churning on whatever it is that you're dealing with during the day, right? So in a lucid dream, that kind of stops. And things become actually much more direct and not so much metaphorical. When you're in a normal dream state, like you just said, the haunted house was a metaphor for something going on in your life, and possibly everything else was too. The idea of even you wanting a cigarette was a metaphor of something, some desire, like I need some sort of relief, whatever that was, right? In a lucid state, once you become fully lucid, all of the metaphor kind of drops away, and you start dealing with things on a little bit more direct level, because then you're more facing, you're not in your subconscious, you're more in a conscious state. And by the way, just letting you know that for those of you who are unsure about, and we haven't gotten into the weird stuff yet, this is just the lucid dreaming we're talking about at this point. This has been proven. I mean, so there really is no contention anymore, even in the scientific field, that this is possible or not. I mean, lots of people have been talking about this for, really thousands of years. The ideas of lucid dreaming goes back into Buddhism and even shamanism for way, way, way back. But it's only recently that we really started proving that they can hook people up now to, MRIs, brain sensors, very sensitive equipment that's picking up our brain waves. And people are able to go into a lucid state and send conscious messages somehow through their, they can do things with their eyes for actual movement. And somehow they're actually able to focus on specific brain patterns. And they can prove that this isn't just, some people are like, oh yeah, but you say that you were awake or lucid during this dream, but that was just part of the dream. Like that was often the argument from people, like, well, that was just part of your dream. But now they're proving, no, that's not the case at all. People are truly able to become conscious in their dream state. And the implications for that, I think we are just now scratching the surface, and what that means for us as conscious people who don't understand our consciousness. I think, that's the rabbit hole that I have gone down with my last book and what I've been studying for 30 years now, what the implications are to basically removing your consciousness, stepping aside from the narrative at hand. That's really what all of this is about. Once you do that, the implications and what you can do at that point, are just, I don't even know how far we can take this at this point. I'm still exploring that realm. So what I had to learn for myself was that probably for about the first year or maybe 2 years, that's what I was doing. I was just spontaneously entering these lucid states, and they got stranger and stranger, and in some ways more frustrating, because in some cases, like I said, there would be people around me too, and I'd have to go, all right, I'm going to go talk to this person and try to figure out, is this like a part of my psyche? Is this like some other part of my, of my consciousness? How does this work exactly? So I would engage characters in conversation, and in talking to other people or other entities, as sometimes they call it in the lucid dreaming field, gets really weird, because you just start realizing this is just like a conversation with anyone else. I don't know what that person's going to say next. And sometimes they seem to have points that you didn't even expect. Like, wow, that's a good point that you just made. You'll actually be in a real conversation, and somebody may even say something that sounds more enlightened, more filled with wisdom, something that's even more intelligent that you would even say. And that starts really getting your brain going, okay, so what the hell's going on? Like, how's that possible? This is my dream, right? So how can I be around other things, that are somehow, that I'm not perfectly connected to? Like, where's their part of the, the narrative going on? I don't, it gets really weird at that point.
Maybe I'm off base, but it almost sort of just gives me the Matrix vibes. Like, you're kind of in your lucid dreaming, you're kind of waking up, you're starting to notice things around you, and then you want to start to interact possibly with people that are saying things that, like, whoa, how they would know that?
Totally.
Anything like
totally.
that? Yeah, I was going to say, did it ever pop into your head? I'm sure it has.
I think that anybody who has touched on lucid dreaming or have had any of these experiences, there's a lot of books and there's a lot of films that you are just naturally, going to feel deeply. Like, when I first saw The Matrix, I was like, oh, once I realized where they were going with that movie, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I understand completely. So a lot of people, when the first time they saw The Matrix, maybe they were a little bit confused because it seems sort of abstract to them. That was not my experience on any level. I'm like, oh, I know, I can feel what that's like. The idea of, because you do have to start going like, all right, there is no concept. Like, when he has the conversation, where Morpheus has the conversation with Neo in the dojo, he's like, this has nothing to do with your muscles. That has nothing to do with me being stronger than you. You and I both were, had basically the same program downloaded to us with that fight scene, right? But he's like, so how come I'm beating you, And he kind of has to get him thinking, like, so what is it? What does it take to actually be? What does strength mean in this realm? What does power mean in this realm? And so I kind of had to start playing with those ideas for, about a couple of years of like, okay, how do I just, can I create whatever I want? What does that require? And what I feel now in retrospect is essentially what I was doing was it was almost like my lucid dreaming was kind of like a dojo sort of training for a while, like where I was just for a couple of straight years going, all right, this is how I focus in a dream. This is how I regain my control. And there are basic things that I would suggest, and I probably mentioned on the last show, but it's always good to mention it again. I'm sure lots of people have perhaps never heard any of this before, but one of the things that not saved my life, that's a bit exaggerating, but really helped me along the path was that I learned how to focus first and foremost in a dream. So I would say that anybody listening out there, if you have any experience in this, if this is a topic, the idea of conscious dreaming, entering conscious states of awareness in your dream states, if this fascinates you, the first thing I would do is, even if you suspect, when the next time you suspect even like, hey, I think I'm dreaming, or I think maybe this is not, when you're even just on that verge of going, I think this is not real. Perhaps I have more agency here than I first thought. The first thing you should do is a very simple trick. You lift your hand up in front of your face and you stare at it. Simple as that. It's as simple as that. If you can do that, if you get to that point, that's actually a huge obstacle to get around, to get to that point. You've just reached a giant goal. It's fantastic. just stare at your hand, hold your focus to your hand. And there's a reason why I'm saying this. Your hand is always going to be there in your dreams. Your hands are your primary instruments that we use to manipulate our world. So for some reason, it seems to be a universal quality that your hands will always be there. Do you remember the movie Inception?
Yeah, I was going to have mentioned that.
Right. So what did they use? They had toys, right? They called them totems. So that's a nice idea. It's an elegant idea. I like the idea. But the reality is that in a dream state, you may not have that thing in your pocket. The reality is that you may find yourself in some weird state that you don't even have pockets on you, you know? So you'd have to go and find that little top that he used or the die that, you know, the other guy used and all these things. So I'm just saying that's not a reliable reality check. A real good, reliable reality check is to put your hand up in front of you. You know your own hands and you hold your attention. Another universal quality in these dream states is that whatever you hold your attention to for more than just a few moments, it'll shapeshift. It'll like go out of focus. It'll twist somehow. It'll change into something else. That just seems to be a trick. So, you know, if you can hold your attention to your hand long enough and you, of course, see your hand shapeshift at that point, that there's no doubt anymore that you're lucid dreaming. You then know completely like, oh, well, there it is then. It could be a little freaky. It could be a little jarring. Don't get me wrong at first, especially if you've never had this happen. Like you think that you're in reality and you just kind of stare at your hand and all of a sudden, you know, you grow more fingers or some shit like that or something like that. I mean, that can be kind of, you know, that can be a little disturbing, but really your mind immediately picks up on it. You go, okay, I know what's going on. Like, you know, like your brain knows what's going on some level. Oh, I'm like awake somehow, but yet my body's still asleep. And now, you know, then you're in Wonderland. You're like kind of like a god in your own sort of, you know, realm because you're fully conscious and you can then just start, you know, you can use that hand trick actually to just keep your focus and whatnot. Anytime you feel like you're losing focus, you can just bring your hand up in front of your face and just kind of try to pull everything back into focus for a moment. It's sort of a meditation, if you will. Before I talk everybody's ear off, please just stop me anytime, by the way.
Well, I was thinking that you were going to go someplace completely different with that first thing you got to do. I was
Where do you think I was going to go?
I thought you were going to say, well, if you believe that you're experiencing lucid dreaming, and what really the first thing you should do is go out and find my book, Migration. And
yes.
That's where I was thinking you were going to go, then come back to something with the lucid dreaming.
Right. I mentioned that. That's all in the book, too, the whole idea.
See?
How that all works. Totally. It's in there. Yeah. So I did that for a good couple of years, and then it got stranger from there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
how do we
go from that into
How do we go from that to all the other crazy stuff?
We can. How do we go from that to time travel?
So we got to make a few steps first. We got to take a couple of jumps. So the next jump that I had to make was that there is a direct connection between lucid dreaming and what they generally call astral projection. That's a term I don't really like. Again, I'm not coming from a new age source, so usually I'll just say like an out of body experience. So what happened for me was that I was finding myself in these lucid states. Sometimes I'd be in places I was familiar with. I'd be in perhaps my childhood home that was, if I was in college at the time, you know, that was a couple 100 miles away, or I would sometimes be watching friends, family, you know, going about their business and whatnot. And after a while, some of these visions were so very specific, like where I was watching, say, a friend of mine, you know, watching television in the morning, and I could see what she was watching on television. I could see how she was laying on the couch and what she was wearing and whatnot. And after a while, I kind of started getting more curious and going, is it possible there's some connection of what's actually going on out there? I mean, I had heard of the concept of astral projection. Again, you're talking, generally a grounded sort of skeptic. I'm an atheist. I'm like, all right, but I'm going to ask questions if nothing else. So I started asking questions. Hey, Emily, what were you doing at 7:30 this morning? You know, that sort of thing. Like exactly, like lay it out for me blow by blow. What were you wearing? Exactly what were you doing? And as the story started coming back, it was, detail by detail, painful detail by detail again and again. I was seeing precisely what was going on in other places. In some cases, these people were hundreds of miles away from me. And it was exactly the time that I suspected, because I have a sense of time, like even when you're in the dream state, I'm like, I know it's about like 7 a.m. or something like that, yada, yada. And after, at first, I'd say for about the first 3 or 4 occurrences, I was still able to go, this is coincidence. Let's think about this rationally. Like this is, I know these people. So, maybe I could have put together enough information about what they may have been doing, right? That sort of thing. I was trying to piece it together rationally. Like, how could I have pieced this information together instead of the thing that I didn't want to deal with, the idea of like, is there something possibly projecting out of my body? And what the hell does that mean? I mean, I don't know what a soul means. I don't take any of those words for granted. I don't immediately just accept the models that, again, a lot of the spiritual community has handed to me. So I didn't know what to do with that. But after it got to about 6 or 7 direct experiences where I was seeing things that in a town that, for one example, I lived in Muncie, Indiana for a while. I went to Ball State years ago. I would sometimes be able to go to certain places that I had never been in that town, and I can go find them later. I'm like, I think that I was at a farmhouse, for example, down this direction. I was there. I spent like 10 minutes there. I could see it. I know the details. And on 2 occasions, I was able to find the exact locations that I was at in parts of town that I had never been at. So after we got to about 6 or 7 of those, that was all I can say is that was kind of, for me, that was like a mental breakdown, that because I didn't want to think about that. I mean, that to me was starting to go, all right, whatever's going on is not just happening in the idea of the safety and comfort of my own mind, right? Somehow I am able to get information, if nothing else, information that's actually going on out there. So what does that mean? Well, I would say that over the years, and now that this has been going on for a long time, this goes into a whole other field of how this connects. So this is what I've been coming up with, because essentially I'm trying to look at the mechanics behind all of this without just saying, oh, well, that's just an astral projection. And I'm just going to let you deal with however you identify that. I try to, as much as I can, in the book Migration. And I'm actually I just started doing a YouTube show where I'm trying to talk through these ideas in a real methodical way. It goes back to our connection to narrative, as what we started with when I was asking you those questions about your own dream. Our connection to the narrative that we are presented in the moment is key to all of it. So it seems that we humans have this we almost have an attraction to storylines. We have an attraction to narratives. We have an attraction to information. And I have an idea why that is. I believe that basically what is a storyline? A storyline, whether it's happening in a dream or it's something you're watching on television or a story that you're reading in a book, we have a natural desire. We love narratives. There's no doubt about that. We're staring at our phones all day right now. Right. I mean, we are constantly looking for some little story, something to distract us, something to whatever. And, some of that just comes down to base stimuli that our body likes. We like an adrenaline rush from action movies, yada, yada, yada. But what we are craving specifically, there's something about our consciousness that craves the pattern of a story, is the best way to describe it. So the reason for that, I believe, is because a story is essentially it's order from chaos. In essentially, that's really all it comes down to, I think, for consciousness. There's something that it likes about order from chaos. If I were to ask any of you, hey, what did you do today? Tell me what you did today. Go ahead.
I worked all day.
Tell me the story. Just a little bit. Just, a quick story. Wrap it up in a story. What happened today?
Sure. So I started at 7 this morning. Worked till 5. I had a lot of patients that came in. Most of them were pleasant. There might have been a couple that made me roll my eyes.
Okay.
But I had lunch at 11:15, so.
Yeah.
I'm riveted.
I know.
All right. That's okay. No, these don't have to be exciting.
Yeah.
But is that
Sorry,
it? Are we going to stop there?
Yeah, I'm going to stop there.
That's okay. The point is this: you have a story, right? If I asked you what you did this week, you'd have a different story. If I asked you your life story, you'd have another story for that. The point is this: our brain thinks in terms of narratives. It thinks in terms of stories. Now, obviously, you just left out a whole lot of information, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
How much? Percentage-wise, of what actually you experienced today, how much of information do you think you left out of what you just told me?
I probably left out at least 85 to 95.
Well, HIPAA laws take care
I
of
know,
a lot of that.
pretty much.
I bet it's closer to like 99 point something,
Yeah,
right?
most
I mean,
with the line over that last 9.
it just goes on forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but that's how we condense, right? That's how we condense our lives on some level. I would imagine there's actually a theory from I'm not going to go into this other guy's book or whatnot. Have you ever heard the concept of the bicameral mind by chance?
No.
We're not going to go into that right now.
Can't
It's
even say
okay.
that word.
Bicameral mind. There's those guys who you want to look up the book that it's based on. Oh, I think it's called something like The Evolution of Consciousness on the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. It is a very long book, and it's about the idea of how humans developed language and what language did to us on it was you could almost say catastrophic, but the input of language on the human brain was like a software update of no other for our species. And this theory is that it almost broke us at first. For a while, our brain didn't know what to do with narrative at all. It didn't know how to handle it. It didn't know how to process it. And there's a theory that for the longest time that for most people, their internal dialogue, their internal narratives that we are constantly running through of all your thinking that you do. Oh, this is what I did today. This is what I did yesterday. And this is my goals. This is what I need to do. All that, all the yada, yada, yada that's going on in the back of your head. There's a theory that was actually at one point completely unconscious in a part of our brain. And in fact, instead, it was just kind of downloaded. The conclusion of all of that thinking was just sort of downloaded to the conscious part of our brain at intervals, right? So we would just sort of get the end result of all of the thinking of the language that our brain was processing. We would just get the end result of it throughout the day. And because of that, some people think that may be where religion kind of started, because it seemed like these messages were just sort of being handed to people on some level of just like, oh, well, it's been revealed that this is what I've got to do later. This has been revealed that this is what I need to do next for the tribe, for the family, yada, yada, yada. The point is that language on the brain, it had some sort of strange effect on us. And perhaps before we invented language, we were possibly more adept at some of these ideas, of the idea of astral projection and becoming lucid. They may have come more easily for us, but language seems to have divided our world up on some level internally. That is, that we now think in language. We now think in narrative, and a narrative is not the truth, essentially. I mean, no matter how good your story of what you did today would be, you're never, right? You're never going to really cover everything that's happened to you, everything that you've experienced. Your brain, in fact, shut out most of it and just ignored 99% of it to begin with, right? It's because that's what its job is, to just, edit and totally toss things out. So a narrative is a really nice condensed version of reality, is essentially what I'm saying. When we become focused on that narrative, we have this weird tendency to identify with it. And you would say that this is where perhaps some of the other esoteric philosophies, or even Buddhism or Hinduism, they come up with this idea of that there is this ego that we have, this personality that we've developed. And that is kind of this running idea that our internal narrative kind of keeps running, like, well, this is who I am. right? This is what it means to be a human, down to this is what it means to be a human for you, what your goals are, what your beliefs are, yada, yada, yada. I mean, there's a lot of information there. That's why we are attracted to a narrative. So this is why I'm going down this rabbit hole with you right now.
I was going to say, how's that?
Hold on.
Time?
Follow me on this.
The question was time travel.
I know. Once you pull away from that narrative, your consciousness appears to reveal more of its true nature, which I believe at this point, our consciousness is a non-localized phenomenon. Now, what does that mean? That means that I believe that it's everything from what I've experienced. Our consciousness is not localized actually to time or space. However, because it is attracted to our story, i.e. our narrative, once it is attracted to that narrative, it's almost like it's like a magnet. It's like a part of consciousness is zeroed in on this little tiny keyhole version of reality, this narrative that you call yourself you, if you're following me on this. So when you go into a lucid dream state, what are you doing? You are removing yourself from the narrative. That's why I was very careful in asking you what happened in that dream, because when you pull back from the dream narrative, you realize, oh, none of this is real. I'm totally free to do whatever I want. So in a lucid dream state, we're able to suddenly manifest wherever we want to. We can kind of go wherever we want to. But because we have pulled back from our narrative in the dream state, that's the only narrative that is holding our consciousness in place at that point, because our body is asleep at that point. Is this starting to make sense? When our body is asleep and you pull back from whatever narrative is operating on you, i.e., in this case, the dream, that's what's operating. You're not, unless you're dreaming about your actual life, that's not generally the case. You are dreaming, you're filled, your head is filled with some story, whatever the story is. I mean, think about the last dream you've had. As ridiculous as it is, it doesn't even matter how stupid the dream is. It's still a narrative that consciousness can attach to. Once your consciousness pulls back from it, you become lucid in a dream state. That's step one. All right. You become lucid and you realize none of this is real. The narrative is not true. Your body's asleep. Nothing at that point is really holding your consciousness in place, you might say. It's not localized any longer. It doesn't appear to be localized. So from there, that's why astral projection is possible. And because consciousness is not localized to time or space, you can then go to other time periods as well.
Oh.
Oh, I know that sounds crazy. Of course it sounds crazy. But hold on. But before that sounds too crazy, physics up to a point actually does agree with me. And I'm going to explain why physics agrees with me on some point. Our universe actually does operate as if everything from the beginning of time to the end of time was one solid structure, one complete churning structure. The universe doesn't operate as the way we see it, moving from the past, into the future. And we have this kind of vague concept of the now, but we always kind of feel like we're moving towards the future. The universe from a physics level, and we're talking quantum physics, I'm not going to go into the full details. Anyone who's listening about this, go look this up on YouTube. Brian Greene, he's a very respected theoretical physicist. He does a really wonderful video. In fact, I actually have been doing my own videos on this exact concept of how this works from the science standpoint, that the universe truly does operate. When they look at it in terms of the quantum physics where particles don't like to obey time and space for some reason. And when they've done all the math, it really does appear that the whole universe acts as if it's one whole. In fact, most physicists will even go, they don't really understand why or how we do experience time in a linear fashion. That is actually the anomaly, if there is an anomaly in this. Okay. So is that kind of making sense on some level? If we can look at the universe as one giant structure, and I'm talking like all of it, everything that has ever happened from the beginning of time to the end of time, it behaves as if it was one thing, whatever that means. And that may, if string theory is correct, that may include the multiverse as well, which gives you which blasts you into a whole other ideas of what it is you can do with these concepts. So the point is that what I'm suggesting is that entire structure of the universe, whatever consciousness is, and I don't know what consciousness is. I'm not going to suggest that I have an idea of what consciousness is, but I believe that it is something akin to a wave, perhaps a quantum wave on some level. It is a field. It's like a field of energy. And that field of energy appears to not have any boundaries on it in terms of, our linear view. It appears to adhere to the way the universe sees itself. Somehow consciousness and this giant structure I'm talking about, and I know this is an abstract concept, thinking about the universe as one giant thing from the beginning to the end, as if it were one, like it was like something you could hold, like an object, like just one basketball or something like that. But that's how the universe operates. I'm saying that consciousness is somehow infused into that as well. So when we are pulled back from our narrative, our limiting pattern that is controlling our reality in the moment, we have greater and greater access to this consciousness. And again, if you're following me, if that consciousness is indeed not localized truly beyond our ego, beyond our identity, beyond our story, that consciousness then has access to different times and different places. In fact, it has access to everything. I can, and I'll give you some more information about that, but I don't want to inundate you guys with too much. I know that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot to take. I'm over here I like turtles.
So, yeah.
Ooh, that was a lot to take in. Now, I checked out some of the videos you had, and I would say the production value, they look great.
Well, thank you. I just started doing those like 5 months ago, and I have a background in art.
Yes.
I'm an artist first and foremost. So but I never had done video editing. So those are taking some work. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, they look good. And they do go into these concepts. I think you break them down really well in like short chunks.
I'm trying to, because it's such an abstract idea, and I know it's such an abstract idea. So the most as I can, I'm trying to like visualize it, to try to show, look, imagine it like this, no, imagine it like this. So that's kind of how I rack my brain over those videos. How can I take this crazy concept and try to really show, because I'm trying to make it as concrete as possible. Because in my head, this is all pretty concrete, actually. It's not so abstract to me, really, especially since I've experienced this, since I've astrally projected into the past and possibly even into the future, though I don't know if, who knows what I was seeing. But one of my first experiences, which I did a video on at the end of season 1 of my series now on YouTube. That series is called Migration, just like the last book I just kicked out. The last video I did in that, I actually went through the whole storyline of my first, what I would consider a true astral projection, where I spent about 3 or 4 minutes in a part of Michigan, which I used to spend my childhood and my summertime and whatnot. But I was approximately about 200 years in the past, and I came back with information about locations of tribes, what the area looked like, that so far is all checked out completely. I mean, everything about exactly, and how what I was seeing from the tribes in terms of their settlements and the kind of housing that they made. I was able to go into all of that and bring that information back and go, I don't know what the name of the tribes were because there was no information like that, but I was able to see for a while. I was able to look around and go, oh, these guys are building, these aren't teepees. This is something else. These are like dome structures. And I could see where their settlements were, and I could see where the house was that, this area, like I said, I spent in my summers, was actually my grandfather's cottage that he had built sometime in the 1930s or 40s or something like that. And, but I was able to see what that land looked like before there was any houses or anything like that. And from after talking to my father and my grandfather, I mean, all of my information has been exactly accurate now. I'm not here to try to convince anyone. That's really an important part for me. In fact, that last video I did where I talked, where I really went into my story, I don't generally do that in my videos, because I try to just explain the mechanics more. I want to try to share this because I feel like there's really nothing I could say that would convince a skeptic. I would hope not. honestly. I mean, honestly, I would be concerned if someone just said, I believe everything that you say. Like, you shouldn't. Like, don't ever do that for anyone. You should go and be skeptical. I mean, ask questions. So I try to give people, like I said, that's why I'm trying to describe the mechanics. Like, I think this is what's going on underneath. So maybe other people can find their way, to what I've experienced. And then, then we can have a common dialogue. Oh, this is how this works.
Now, where can everybody go watch the videos, learn about the book, learn more about you, Ian?
So, yeah, the videos are, the series is called Migration. And if you look up my name on YouTube right now, it's the only channel I have. So it's Ian Jaydid. If you look on YouTube, that's the only channel there is. And right now there's only about 13, 14 videos right now. They're each about 20 minutes or so. So like I said, it's a new channel. So yeah, go check those out. Those are great. And my book, Migration. This is what I just kind of laid out for you. That's what the book is all about, going through exactly how our consciousness is attached to storylines and narratives and stimuli. And so the book kind of goes into a lot of our connections with media as well, because obviously, like I said, we're getting so many of our narratives from our phones, from our whatever, and there's a comfort to that on some level. When things seem too big or too overwhelming, it's real easy to just go look at a stupid cat video or something like that. So I go into that, not just the psychology of that, but what that means for your consciousness and how you can rise above all of that. So, Migration, if you want to hear about that stuff, Migration, or if you just want a crazy story that I made up, I do sci-fi too. That was where I started. That was my first book, Tripping the Field. So I'm sure we'll put all the links.
Yes, there. I will put links in the show notes for everybody. Go learn more about Eden, what he's up to. Ian, this has been melting my mind a lot. It's always fascinating to talk with you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for letting me ramble.
Yeah, absolutely. What I know, though, is next time I'm dreaming, I'm going to put my hand in front of my face.
Put your hand in front of your face.
And then hopefully it pops Wolverine claws, snickety snick. And then
I've not had that. I've had my hand do about 100 different things in front of me. I've never had the Wolverine claws. I've never had that. But it's, that's exactly what you should do. Bring your hand up in front of your face. And I tell you, once you see your hand shift in front of you, you're not going to be in any sort of like doubt anymore. Like, oh, I know what's going on now. Like either I just took a whole bunch of drugs or I'm asleep and I'm dreaming. So one or the other. So, yeah.
Ian, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Greatly
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. And remember, if it's not weird,
it's not worth checking out.